I think the essence of American entrepreneurship is that it's bred from hard times.
POSH is not a ticketing platform. We are empowering people to monetize IRL communities.
These are the founders of POSH, Avante Price and Eli Taylor-Lemire. After dropping out of NYU, they scaled POSH during the pandemic to over 2 million users and 80 million in processed tickets around the globe. We discuss how they're powering the next generation of live experiences, the unique insights of Gen Z, and their recent 22 million Series A funding.
So happy to have you guys. I think we want to get started by talking about your backgrounds, because you are both serial entrepreneurs from a really young age, maybe even high school for you, Avante. Maybe we can kind of get into, what you're doing before POSH first.
Yeah, Eli was also starting his journey early.
I wouldn't say serial. I think we each had one big one before.
Hey.
Not even big, but
not even
one
big.
One
One
I
learning
know there are a
experience.
couple of those. There's a couple though.
one mistake.
Come on. It's never a mistake. That's one of the main themes of this podcast. It's never a mistake.
It's wins and lessons.
Exactly. But yeah, I guess definitely where we met actually was an accelerator for a company where I had started in high school and brought into my first year or two of college. It was called Chorebug. It was basically TaskRabbit, but you could hire high schoolers to do odd jobs for you. So a lot of people in suburban areas would book local high schoolers that were, track and field or whatever other sport athletes that couldn't get a job, right? Because they were always bogged down with sporting. And simultaneously, these people needed hands-on help, and they didn't really want to use TaskRabbit and have, kind of stranger adults coming over to their homes.
Right.
So it was great. It built community. Had problems getting off the ground because people would churn after they graduated high school to stick with the mission. And so you had to keep finding new users, but it was a really awesome learning experience.
Yeah, and really good social impact as well, right? You're empowering, students. I mean, giving young people the opportunity to have a job is a, really great and admirable mission, and you did that for a little while. So that's great.
And then for Eli, you worked a few ventures yourself. How did you decide to end up with POSH, and how did you juggle all these three experiences?
Yeah, I was really into photo video production growing up, and I was obsessed with YouTube. My dream was to be a YouTuber and move to LA.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, I got into Uplink was my first consulting company kind of where I was just doing freelancing work. I worked for a magazine and then a bunch of music, did a bunch of music videos with rappers. And yeah, I lived outside of the city, but I would take the train into the city each weekend and just shoot as much stuff as I could. And then kind of at the same time wanted to teach myself how to code just so I could make a website for that. And I had an idea about how I would automate the bookings essentially. Fell in love with coding, did computer science in high school. It was kind of the pilot program. It was really good. And then I was class president and I was tasked with bringing the community together. And simultaneously, I was actually in this nonprofit program called Hack Club. And the guy there suggested that I use Twilio, which ironically Avante and I, or POSH, is now a huge user of. But it was a really easy to use API where you could play around with texting and stuff like that. So I played around with that and some other APIs and threw together this app that the school could use where teachers and students could answer trivia questions. And I worked on it with one of my best friends in high school. And then we had this amazing teacher, shout out to Mr. Kravitz, who helped us out, put this app together where you could answer trivia questions, get trading card versions of your teachers.
Oh, wow.
And it was really cool. It was actually an amazing idea and really did foster a ton of community. And then they did it the following year after I graduated, but then COVID kind of screwed it over because you couldn't have students walking around the hallways. But anyway, long story short, it gave me that bug for, wow, tech is so cool. You can build something where a bunch of people are participating in an automated way, and it actually has impact on people's lives and creates connections. So yeah, fast forward, I was scrolling through Instagram trying to find cool people to network with in the city after I got accepted into NYU, and Avante was DJing all these crazy parties.
Oh yeah.
So I saw him
crazy
and was
parties.
Yeah, damn, I should network with this guy. So my go-to way of sliding into people's DMs was to offer a free photo shoot. So I offered him a photo shoot. We actually never did it. We just linked up, and then he gave me a DJ gig.
Photo shoot.
But yeah, we started working on parties together after that.
Okay, so the lessons here, you got the bug for coding in high school, and you did chore bug in high school. So together you both got the bug, and then crazy parties leads to networking. If I was trying to network with someone, I don't think I would say, hey, that guy DJs crazy parties, I want to network with him. It would just be kind of wanting to be his friend. But I see that. So being someone's friend, starting a conversation is one thing, but how did you know that you wanted to start a business together?
Complementing skills, probably.
Can you walk us through that initial process?
Yeah, so POSH wasn't actually started as a software company in any way. It was actually started out of, we were freelancers for a bunch of different event organizers in the New York area. I was DJing, he was a photographer, right, creating recap videos and things like that. And I was obviously, just playing music. And we were actually both underage, right? And so that was, the caveat number one, right? We needed to first get our, ID situation sorted. Once that was sorted, we realized that a lot of these people that were hiring us didn't really care about the underage thing because we had a lot of influence over getting the NYU crowd to go to a lot of these events, right? And they knew that the people who were underage that we were bringing to, but they all had IDs. And at the end of the day, these bars, right, and venues really just needed people to come fill the seats, right, and start spending money. So they kind of turned the other cheek. But because of that, they also knew that these people that we were inviting out didn't really have many options of places to go. And so it was a win-win for the attendees we were bringing and the organizers of these events. But at the end of the day, the product itself of the event was always a very low quality experience because these organizers felt some type of way around like, well, we have the only supply of events these students can get into. And so they didn't really put a lot of effort into the experiences that we were working at. And so fast forward through those experiences, as well as getting paid late, getting taken advantage of, our friends not really enjoying these experiences, but feeling subjected to the limited supply, we started POSH as an event company, as a community for NYU, Columbia, Pace students to come have a POSH experience, even as, fundamentally really an underage college student in New York City. So what we were doing was we were finding these venues that were actually pretty upscale and pretty nice. I won't name any of them, right, because it probably would not be great for them. But we were finding these venues, and they were really nice and actually very high quality, but they might have been like off the beaten path or not somewhere where there's a lot of foot traffic. And so they still needed our traffic, and we kind of just would have this unspoken rule about like, look, we have students primarily. You know what that means. But like, we're going to put 300 students in this venue. And they would agree, right? And we wouldn't have to spend any money to rent the place out because they just wanted people to spend money at the bar. Right. And we would make money on selling tickets. And so we started this community together because we both had these experiences as freelancers, and we had this audience of students who were coming to these events we were working at, but we weren't getting a lot of the spread on the actual tickets that were being sold because it wasn't our experience, right?
And we kind of had the full-scale team, like Avante is DJing the events, I'm doing the photo video, so we didn't need to hire anyone really.
Exactly. And so we started out just hosting events for NYC college students like once every week or two. We had a few other friends who started promoting them and bringing in other students. And through those experiences, we just became closer as friends, but also had that business relationship and bonded over the previous startup experience we had, and realized a fundamental problem that we were experiencing, right, was that we were using products like Eventbrite, you name it, to manage our own community, and that they weren't meeting the mark, right? We're really, really passionate about brand, especially Eli, and we couldn't speak our truth and create our brand on these platforms. They were kind of putting their logo all over the place. Every page looked the same. We didn't really get a lot of ownership over our own data. They weren't really giving us any marketing tools, right? It was really just a payment processor when you look at most of these event management solutions. And so really what we wanted to do was just create an awesome custom branded white labeled page and own more of the customer experience and automate, like Eli was saying, the outreach to these students that we were engaging on a weekly basis. And so out of that, Eli built a simple MVP originally just for our own usage, so we could automate the texting of the students every week instead of me manually texting them every single day, and simultaneously so we could put our brand at the forefront of the pages. After using that product for about 3 events, our friend COVID occurred, and that put a halt right on our events. But in our experience, there's a blessing in disguise because that inertia that we experienced, right, or lack of inertia, made us take a step back and realize how powerful this product that Eli had built was, and kind of was the impetus for the pivot from an event company into a software company.
Okay, so that makes a great amount of sense, and COVID was a turning point for all of us, right? And so what I'm interested in learning now is how you created what POSH has become today. And so if you can even just outline exactly what POSH does, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, so today we like to think we've created the Shopify for events, essentially. And you can scale from a 10-person dinner party to a 10,000-person music festival with our tools. It's a full stack event management and marketing solution. So what that means is not only are you ticketing through us, but you're running a lot of your marketing operations, and really community building is at the center of everything. So a lot of our tools are focused more so around attendee attention than just attendee acquisition, which is a big differentiator for us. And I think what we're really solving is like, we're going in this direction in the world right now where everything is so online and VR is coming out and people are so addicted to online interactions. And someone needs to save the world from that and bring us back to true in-person human connection. And our tools allow people that are looking for great experiences to find that, but also people that are amazing curators of community and experiences to better reach the people that are looking for that.
And so what was it like to create a critical mass of individuals that would be interested in being on the app, right? So like your background, event creation, event promotion, right? It probably wasn't too difficult for you to, perhaps get some event planners or promoters on the platform to create parties. But to get individuals to come on and, create a form of flywheel effect for them to enjoy the events and have their friends come, that is a completely different issue. What was that decision like to be like, okay, we're not just going to create an event promotion tech business, but we're going to create a marketplace? And what were your first steps on creating the critical mass of users?
Well, we didn't.
Okay.
we cared obsessively about the supply side and providing amazing value for organizers, and they filled up the attendee side of the marketplace for us.
Okay.
And we actually we released our mobile app in October of last year officially, so we were already 3 years into the venture. And that was the first time where we created something truly for the end users in terms of where they can explore and interact on a social level more easily. But I think, we never explicitly, especially in the beginning, we're like, we actually didn't really care about the end users at all, because as Avante just explained, all the problems we were facing is what we really wanted to solve, which is the things organizers were struggling with. And I think we understood that if we gave organizers an amazing platform and experience, that they would bring the end user to us.
Eli, I'm seeing a big lesson here, big lesson for everyone. Talk to users.
Yeah.
Like do it, please, and do it as early as possible. And when you talk to users, ensure that or talk to your customers, and when you're doing it, ensure that you are focused on solving their specific problem and not opening yourself up to a completely different one. For small companies, small businesses, small startups, you can only solve so many problems, right? And I think that that's really admirable. I feel like from the beginning, if I was you, just based on wanting to get a larger amount of people involved, I would say like, hey, tell all my friends about it, trying to build a business that way by having people come to the events, but keeping yourself focused on who the customer is, beyond just knowing who the user base is I think a really interesting insight in terms of double-sided marketplace creation.
Amen. Yeah. Now we're working towards creating a third side to the marketplace, which we can get into. But it's
what is it? Tell us from now. We'd love to hear that.
Well, now we're working on incentivizing people who are in the shoes we were in, right? That middle ground between attendee and organizer. You're a freelancer, you're a contributor. To create tools for those people to monetize their contribution to the world of these events. And what that looks like, right, is creating tools for your freelance photographer who wants to get booked. How do you create a profile where people can, pick a date, you can negotiate a rate, etc., and then eventually a marketplace of those different service providers. Because when you look at the biggest limiter or barrier to entry for any new organizer, it's relationships, right? Maybe you have the tool book, maybe you have the audience. I can easily bring 500 people out, but if I don't know a venue, I don't know a DJ, a photographer, these other people I need to work with to establish this actual event. I have my community, but I don't have the resources. That's what's, basically limiting anyone with a community, even you guys, right? You have a massive community, but to host an event, you need to understand how to do it and who to work with.
And so can you tell us more about the organizer aspect of your business? Is that a growing component? How many have you worked with so far?
Yeah. So we've worked with 20,000 organizers, a little more.
20,000?
20,000 organizers so far. And the entire idea, like Eli was saying, right, Shopify for events was the entire ethos of the brand for about the first 2.5, 3 years. Now we are moving into these other marketplace-esque features and really caring a lot about the consumer and helping people find belonging and community on the platform, because we have so many events and enough supply where if I can show you one of those 20,000 organizers and communities that speaks to you, you're going to get a lot of value out of POSH. But if we didn't have that supply at first, right, it would have been useless to say, hey, Antonio, here's 10 events and try to find one that you like, there's
Yep.
probably not a high chance that you're going to like one. But now if I show you 1 out of 20,000 different communities, you probably will like at least one of them, right? And so now a lot of it is about targeting, right, and really making, taking that TikTok-esque for you ethos towards events and communities and showing people things that speak to them.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, something that I've always had maybe a little bit of a gripe with as a Shopify user, and I love Shopify. Shopify has made my entire life possible. We're not here without Shopify. But something that I've always thought about is that Shopify could maybe promote the companies that are using its platform a bit better. And it's really hard for them, right? They have millions of businesses on there, right? And for small businesses, it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to do more than, I don't know, highlight just a few at a pop-up shop every once in a while. But I have thought that, at the very least, they could provide resources maybe to make that possible. And it feels like this organizer advocacy program at least provides a resource to event planners to maybe open that up. And that's a competitive advantage. As a small business owner myself, I would have loved to have somebody be able to come in and create some form of platform for me to support my business, even if it wasn't Shopify themselves. So a triple-sided marketplace, that's pretty fascinating.
Exactly. I think the other thing to note is what you said about being focused is very, very important, because it's not like these organizers weren't asking us to send them new demand from the beginning, right? The number one question and honestly barrier to our growth at the beginning was we wanted to work with a large organizer, and they're like, well, everyone in X market already knows us, right? We have 20,000 people that come to our events on an annual basis. Like, how are you going to make that 30,000? And we were like, we had to be very honest with them and say, we're not. What we're going to do is we're going to help you retain your 20,000 people in your community better and get them to come back more and more. And you actually don't need to grow the size of your community. You need to have a better relationship with the people that are in your community. And if people bought that, they'd use us. And if they didn't buy it, right, then they wouldn't use us. But now we really have a double-edged sword here. We can both help people retain and grow, but that was only possible by being solely focused on retention at first.
Yeah, and the concept of user retention, I think now is going to be interesting for you guys as individuals are using the platform, right? And so, we downloaded the app. I love the design. I think it's great. Eli, if you're the design guy, kudos, congrats. It's awesome. The branding is sick. The logo is great. The colors are awesome. And it's really easy to use, even from your immediate ability to, find yourself to a great event. What I'm curious about is how your user experience is going to be guided. Your UX journey is going to be guided as you end up, moving from October when you launched that part of the app to what comes next. Because we're in an early stage now for that part of your journey. And yeah, can you walk us through one of those, user experience challenges or the opportunities that you have?
Yeah, I think transparently, that's totally one of the biggest things we're facing, and something that we're thinking about a ton on a week-to-week basis right now is how do we expand to a 3-sided marketplace or just general infrastructure that supports the whole ecosystem in a manner that doesn't overcomplicate it for the people that are there for the very simple reasons of hey, I'm just trying to find a great experience to go to. Still trying to have our ear to the customer as much as possible and really just be guided by our users' journeys and what they're looking for. Yeah, I think the answer is as simple as that. Is it's something we're laser focused on right now, and we're constantly trying to iterate on what is the simplest user experience. I think something that we accomplished well with this recent version of the app is that you can seamlessly switch between being an organizer and being attendee on the app in one place. But now we're trying to iterate on it and make it even more simple, because it can also be a little bit complicated in the sense that a lot of attendees, I think, are familiar with apps where there isn't any organizer features in their way as they browse. So we're trying to make it an experience where for people who are interested in becoming an organizer themselves, they can do that easily. But the people who aren't at the moment still have a very clean layout that's easy to use.
We talked about the UX. Can we go back? You guys scaled to over 2 million users over 6 continents. Can you tell us originally how you got out of New York? How did you decide to say we want to expand to LA and even internationally?
Yeah, so one really, really exciting component of our business that's really not an ode to us, but just the function of the business itself is that it is 2-sided, and that also New York is a great breeding ground for not even national, but international expansion, right? Because people from all over the world are here using products that are born here and taking them back to wherever they came from, whether they're on a vacation and they visited an event over the weekend and then went back to whatever place they came from, et cetera. And so at the beginning, it really was mainly New York based. And then we kind of started putting our ear to the ground on where was the product being used outside of New York City, right? And so consumers, like you said, right, would purchase a ticket, and then they'd go back to LA. A lot of LA usage and Miami usage at the beginning. And then we'd see a few events start to pop up there, and we would start pouring more fuel on the fire by reaching out to these places. But from a more tactical perspective, right, we started out March 2020, the pandemic happens. We brought our first MVP to market October 2020. That's like when we consider launching. So when we had our first dollar of GMV and actually like announced publicly that this platform was available to others. And we were still right in the middle of the pandemic, right? And so we realized New York was completely shut down. We got a 6-month lease in Miami, which was one of the first markets to reopen, right? Florida and Texas were like the first states to reopen.
Right.
And moved down there for 6 months and just tried to empower all the organizers there who still had been out of business from March to October.
And went to
right?
the beach and stuff.
Yeah, a little bit of that. But definitely we were trying to empower, whoever we could to emerge from the pandemic successfully. So even that short stint of about 8 months that they were out of business was a ton. Right. Think about New York. People were out of business for 18 months here. Yeah. So our whole mission at the beginning was like, how do we empower people to emerge from the pandemic? And the initial go-to-market was just popping up in markets that were reopening as the U.S. reopened. So first it was Miami, then we went to Austin for a little bit, and then eventually, California started to come back, New York started to come back, and kind of just wanted to be that first platform people used after their brief hiatus, right? Because then they would be retained really well and be thankful, right, for us being the platform that came to help them from this really, really hard period.
So you've raised over $9 million in seed and seed extension funding. How did all of those moves and proactive business changes relate to your fundraising strategy? And perhaps maybe you can walk us through how you got to those seed numbers as a whole.
Yeah, so a lot of fundraising is like people will tell you that you need to understand the use of funds from like a very, very minute level. I don't think that's how it really works. I don't think that's really like no one's breathing down your neck of like, you want to raise $5 million. Like, how is every dollar going to be spent? No one expects you to know that, right? They want to understand like a general proportional spend of like 30% of our funds are going to go towards OpEx, 20% to R&D, whatever it might be, right? And those are just random numbers. Usually, you should put as much as possible in R&D. But the idea here, right, is like they want to understand like your general spending strategy, not what exactly it's going to be spent on.
Right.
And a lot of the amount of funds is more centered around the ownership target that the investors have, and then the valuation is based on the revenue or growth that you've currently achieved, right? So effectively working backwards, it's like you look at the metrics of the business today, then you look at, okay, we can, reasonably deserve this valuation. And if we're talking to this investor here who has a 10% ownership target, then they're probably going to want to write a check of this size. And actually, they're more concerned with their ownership target than what the use of those funds is going to go towards. They just want to understand that they'll own a certain amount, because how their model works is they need to own a certain amount of all the companies they invest in, so that after a few rounds of dilution, right, they come to some number they expect to own,
right,
based on an expected outcome valuation upon exit or IPO, and how much that would actually be worth and how much they'll return to the fund. And so going back to what you're talking about, like how do we think to raise $5 million, et cetera, it's actually not even $5 million at once. We raised over, a long period of time on SAFEs, which have become extremely popular.
Yep.
And effectively what they are, right, is not even a funding round. You make a relationship with someone. It's a one document. You sign the document. They wire you funds. That is as simple as what a SAFE is. And you can actually get them off the YC website. They're not even something you need a lawyer really to create, because they're standardized across every company. You fill in the blank with your company and the investor's name, and you sign it.
And another version of that, just for context, is a KISS, a Keep It Simple Security. SAFE was developed by Y Combinator, and KISSes were developed by 500 startups, I believe. So great forms of funding for early stage companies. KISS, yeah.
But effectively, right, boiling it back down to our story, we launched October 2020. We got $100K SAFE from one early angel. We used that for almost a year. Right, because it's just the two of us, and we didn't really have a lot of OpEx, and we didn't have anyone to pay. We just need to keep the lights on for ourselves. We were still in school, right, and we worked off that $100K for about a year until finally we realized, all right, like we had a good amount of GMV, we had some metrics, we understood like what kind of valuation we could go out to get from market, and we wanted also to get some real investors from SF and who had later stage startup experience who could help us get to that next stage. And so at that point we wanted to start going out to raise a $1.5 million pre-seed. And that's kind of how that process started, just because we knew that we needed to start hiring. Eli was the only engineer and product person.
Oh, wow,
And we
even
needed
at that
to
time.
build a ton of features, right? And so to get that going, and also on the go-to-market side, so that I wasn't personally scraping Eventbrite every day, sending out 50 cold emails, doing cold calls,
Yep.
and I could actually think about, operationalizing the business. We needed more bandwidth.
Right.
Which I think is a good thing to sum up to is it feels like every time we raise, there's this like natural intuition moment where we realize that more capital could unlock a serious stage of growth. So it's not like, hey, it's a good market, let's go get money. It's more like, okay, now there's actually an opportunity where if we had more money on the table, we could grow a lot faster or operationalize something that we haven't been able to right now. And every time that amount of capital that we would need to hit the next level naturally grows.
Can you briefly go into what was the hiring process for scaling? You said you were looking for more developers for the app. What was the decision process of that?
Yeah, I think the hiring as a mechanism changes so quickly over time. So I would read some article that had explained it as I think it was when you want to get to 10 to 20K a month in revenue, the founders can kind of do everything. When you want to get to 100K a month in revenue, you just need ICs that are able to get more work done for you. So just really just grow your bandwidth. And then when you want to get to $1 million a month, then you need A+ talent. So I think in the beginning, and we still got fantastic people, some of whom are still with us today, but they weren't hired because they had 10 years of extensive experience in engineering or sales or whatever that was. We hired them because they were super passionate and super hardworking. At the beginning, those were the things that we looked for. Now it's way more like, hey, how do we get the guy that took this startup from Series A to Series D or whatever it is that has all this experience with how to scale out a team. But yeah, I think if we were going to summarize hiring, at the beginning, we wanted people who were passionate, hardworking, and another big thing, we basically strictly hired people that had been in the industry. So the first engineer we got, shout out to David, who's still with us today.
Shout out, David.
And has grown immensely, was also a nightlife photographer. His brother was DJing with Avante, but he knew everything about the industry. So like when it came to actually building out the product, we didn't have to sit there and explain why features were important. If anything, he was telling us like, oh, yo, we should build this too. and is naturally super excited about what we were working on. So looking for people like that in the beginning was so key.
And so this is in regards to your decision to hire, right?
Yeah.
To take it a step back, though, I want to talk about your own commitments to this business, right? You both were NYU dropouts, and you chose to leave, an exceptional university. I think we can all agree on that, even though we're all alums. I guess we're alums. We all did go there. You chose to leave. And I think it would be helpful for us to know, you said you were still in school at a certain time when you had even raised some money, what it was like and what that turning point was when you said, hey, it's time for me to maybe move on to, work on this full-time, even without an academic commitment.
Yeah, I think so. From the beginning, obviously, we both had the entrepreneurial spirit, but you also have to weigh the pros and cons of just like, keeping the lights on, paying for rent, food, things like that, right? And then, like you said, NYU is a great school where you can get a great job outside of it and start your career on a great trajectory. And so a lot of the thinking in our heads was around, well, as long as we can provide ourselves with enough capital to keep the lights on, right? Why would we not want to do something that we love rather than going into a job where we have to go work for someone else and, basically contribute to their vision and their passion. We have a vision that we're really passionate about, but it won't make sense to pursue this full time if we can't, pay rent, right? It's functionally, you need to do it as a human being. And so coming off the back of that $1.5 million pre-seed, we were at least able to finally start paying ourselves a salary. And it was really just enough to live in a studio apartment, but at least it was enough that we didn't have to go get a job somewhere else. And I think that was the switch where we realized, okay, this could fail tomorrow, and we would have to figure it out and go back to school. And that's why actually dropping out wasn't even one big just decision. We actually took the 2 semesters that NYU allowed us of leave, right? And so we raised $1.5 million. We were like, all right, well, there's no reason to at least do this semester. Took a semester off.
Right.
The company was still scaling 6 months later.
Right.
Or let's take the second semester off. And then it was at that point, towards the end of that second semester, also there was a summer in between those 2 semesters. So we really got a full year off, right?
Right.
And it was that following December when it was like, all right, you're going to have to come back after the January break. And, there were definitely some conversations, but I think, from the beginning, we were very aligned that we wanted to drop out. It was more like talking to our parents.
Yeah. I would say though, like since the podcast is for younger people considering entrepreneurship, definitely like I think pop culture makes it seem like dropping out is, as Avante was saying, some like you sit down and you're like, okay, I'm going to drop out of school and go full time on this thing. It doesn't have to be like that at all. And you can risk mitigate like crazy by taking a really long leave of absence. Also, we maxed out our time spend per week, I would say, in terms of like we would meet up at Stern and be working till like 2 a.m. and then go to class in the morning.
Yeah.
And so you can put in so much effort before you actually get to the point where you fully have to leave school. And so you should really validate your idea and get revenue, and then you can leave school. It doesn't need to be this thing of like, oh, I'm gonna drop out and just go crazy.
Yeah. Let's be clear, y'all. You know, they had a $1.5 million seed round, pre-seed round raised before they chose to drop out, right? And I think that like that's something that is important, right? Maybe you don't need to raise that much, or you really don't need to raise any money, but you have to have some real customer validation. You should totally talk to some users, and you should make sure that you're building something that has legs, because it's such a serious decision beyond the tough conversation that it requires with your parents.
Yeah.
So you know, let's get back into the time frame of when POSH was built, because we're talking about the COVID era. And, it was a crazy time for any of us in the New York City metropolitan area at the time. You guys went to Miami for a bit, chose to come back though. In my opinion, being here in like the 2021 years, so not 2020, not when it was fresh, but like 2021, it was a really unique environment.
It was dope.
Felt like very fresh. There wasn't a lot of tourists. There wasn't a lot of like the kind of like crazy day to day that you see every day right now. But it was still all the bones of a great, American city were there, a great global city were there. Walk us through, in your eyes, what that time period in New York was like, especially building an events-based business in that time for young people.
So one of the initial features that helped us grow a lot was, as we were saying, even helped us scale our own community, was our SMS feature. We allow, and we still do this today, we allow organizers to send out unlimited free text blasts to their community to re-engage them for future events or send notifications, etc., right? And why that's relevant for COVID and why it helped us blow up a lot is because a lot of events were being taken down on Eventbrite, or even actually scoped out by the NYPD and shown up to be shut down because of, they actually were usually following regulations, but people, the regulations were such a blurred line that each officer would take it into their own account to determine whether or not something should continue to go on. And so people felt lost because one person was saying that you could host an event, someone else was saying that you have to go sit down, you have to be 6 feet apart. There are all these different rules in place, and no one really knew what to trust, and they were changing on a week-to-week basis. And so POSH was the only platform that allowed you to hide your address and send out the location and details to approved guests to make sure that these events were not being shut down. And so we came back, and it was kind of this prohibition era feeling in the air, especially in the event space, where people felt like they couldn't connect, even though they felt safe to do it, and they weren't around, older people or their parents or people that might be, more high risk for COVID, but that they were, being literally shunned by the government from connecting and reigniting the relationships that they had lost. And so we felt it was our duty, similar to, Batman or Superman, right?
Who was Batman and who was Superman?
To bring back, nightlife to the city. And that was, through that one simple feature spawned many other features, but that's really what the whole ethos of the brand really is kind of this post-apocalyptic era and feeling.
Do you think you're here without that happening? Ironically, for an event startup, do you think you're here without COVID happening?
I love that you said what a great American city looks like, because to me, I think the essence of American entrepreneurship is that it's bred from hard times, and that all of the great American companies came from a period of chaos. So right before COVID was the financial crisis, but then even before that, like times, I don't know, the Great Depression or like wars and stuff like that. The dot-com boom. Those were all during periods of either like economic turmoil or cultural turmoil. And there's a really magical feeling to those times in terms of how people come together and have that drive to innovate. And yeah, it just felt like a Wild West kind of time where it feels right to solve problems.
Yeah, and it's like you take all of that kind of infrastructure and then combine it with a generation, right, that is frankly hard to understand, right? I'm curious, as you two are maybe the premier event planners in New York City right now. at least by the transitive property. like you are there, people that you are empowering are creating incredible events. And I would like to think you all have, a pulse on the culture. What makes Gen Z event culture, different? Is it different from, the events that our parents used to go to?
I think it's that, going back to what we kind of think our mission is now, is that it's the first generation where gathering in person is the antithesis of the norm. So like with all the previous generations, it was very normal to go out, and that was how you connect with people. And this is the first generation where the default way to connect with people is online. And so it's the first time that it's like against how they'd normally go about connecting.
Eli, I see why you're a branding expert. You have your pulse on the culture, man.
Thank you.
The antithesis of the status quo. Knowing that, just being alive outside, talking like we are now, is, not what people are doing on day to day. This is the first generation where that's been possible, even different from the millennials that came just a couple years before us.
As you continue to grow, do you think you'll have competition with ticket platforms like Ticketmaster, Eventbrite? How do you stay on top of that trend?
So something to think about here is POSH is not a ticketing platform. We are empowering people to monetize IRL communities, and not even to monetize them, but just to grow them and scale them, right? And when you think about what a ticketing platform is it's a payment processor for someone who's creating a sporting event or live music show, whatever it might be. But you can think of us less as a Ticketmaster competitor and more as a competitor to like Instagram or even Patreon, where people are building communities. But again, like Eli said, they're building those communities online. No one is helping people build communities in real life, right? This is the first time where people are able to find really targeted content. When you think about the generations before us, you turn on the TV, there's maybe 100 channels if you're, have a good plan. And none of them's really speaking to you in any meaningful way. But now you can turn on Netflix, and it's the same thing with content on social media, where you can, find a really targeted for you page with very targeted content that speaks to you. But there's not really a way to find targeted IRL content or experiences that really speak to your interests and the kind of people that you want to connect with. And our whole mission is to help you do that, right? And to find that experience in those IRL communities and people that you go into a room and you're like, wow, I relate to everyone here in a really meaningful way or around a similar interest. And POSH made that possible.
So how could you see then the future of POSH relating to the future of social media? Would you rather integrate POSH with an existing social media?
Hell no.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us why.
We think about taking mind share away from Instagram or TikTok, right? You can either socialize on Instagram or TikTok, or you can socialize on POSH and build much more meaningful connections.
And so this is a real psychological analysis that you all have done. You're trying to get people off of the apps and into IRL experiences by creating an app. It seems like that would be a bit of an oxymoron.
Our head of marketing, who's amazing, shout out Anthony, who just did a whole presentation kind of on some of the stuff we're talking about, showed that yes, it's psychological, but there's also so many statistics out there about even one statistic was that male virginity was going up like crazy, and a lot of there's so many quantitative things that are backing that loneliness is a massive problem, and that it's driven by people just sticking to being online. So it's actually super data backed too, that Gen Z is going to have a very, very serious issue with not being able to socialize.
The goal here is you should open the app within 3 to 5 swipes, find an experience that speaks to you, and then close the app and go experience that.
Bro, I did that. I'm not gonna lie, that's what happened. I didn't end up going anywhere, but downloaded it, and that's exactly what happened. I found events that I could hypothetically go to, maybe if we weren't recording this podcast, could hypothetically go to, and probably would have had a great time, and would have had the ability to share with my friends as well.
Exactly.
I think that's really amazing, and Eli, once again, you have your hand on the pulse of the culture. Gen Z is the most depressed generation, the most anxious generation, and the generation that is spending the most time on their phones.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a lot of debate right now. You have Professor Jonathan Haidt, Professor Scott Galloway, both of Stern, ironically, leading the kind of national discussion on that. Jonathan Haidt's recent book, The Anxious Generation, they are leading the discussion on that. And I think the question becomes how, is this causation or is it correlation? When you talk to people like you guys, that are, you know, on the pulse of everything that's going on, it becomes
It's the
actually quite
vapes.
clear. It's the vapes. that it could be causation, right? And, you know, we're talking about a lot of different things right now. The government's talking about a lot of different things right now, like the ban of TikTok, for example, and like seeing how that would potentially change this. I think people are starting to take this problem seriously. And seeing you all, you know, creating an antithesis of the status quo through IRL events is something that's, you know, really, really great. Let's get into a bit of the content of those events, though. Gen Z consumes 20% less alcohol on average than millennials. And millennials actually consume less alcohol than the generations that precede them. And so this is kind of an unprecedented move into like a sober, or at least sober curious population here. How does that factor into the type of events that, you know, you're seeking to put on POSH?
It's a great question. The types of events that we started with were obviously nightlife-esque and oriented, but now, as I was getting into, right, we're really trying to help anyone who has an online community monetize and scale that community IRL. And so we have people that run dating podcasts, or actually also founder and startup podcasts that, you know, as I'm sure you guys can attest to, it's very hard to monetize these communities. But if you hosted an event of all the listeners and all the people who've been on here, that'd be a great way for everyone to network and make real relationships that people would 100% be willing to pay for. And so the idea really comes down to education, right? And educating these community builders that they can make money and scale their audience and provide real value to their audience, letting their audience connect with each other in person, and scaling as far outside of not just, we still want to cater to nightlife, but really being a platform that speaks to any IRL community. And we're already seeing this. We had puppy yoga a few weeks ago happen, where there's a, you know, a yoga studio that hosted an event, and they partnered up with a adoption center and had a bunch of puppies running around while people did yoga, and monetized that. And you could adopt the puppies that were running around. Like, that is so creative and such a fun, cool experience. And it's really just about educating people that you can use POSH to foster those communities.
Cool. And so how do you monetize puppy yoga, or any event, of course?
I mean, think about what a ticket is, right? It's actually intangible. It's just paying for access to that community, and really just paying it forward to that person who's congregating that. So the person who rented out the yoga studio, the puppies were free. The adoption clinic wanted them to be seen and adopted. And who wouldn't want to pay $20 to go, you know, do yoga? You're already paying that for any other yoga studio, and play with some puppies. And so the people that attended were happy to pay just for access to a cool experience they could tell their friends about, and, you know, spend some time meeting other people at.
Do you guys have any dream events or communities that you want to eventually happen on POSH?
Probably a lot of dream performance artists that we both want.
Like who? Shout them out.
We're both big Martin Garrix fans. That would be crazy. I want Drake for sure at some point.
We got the owl logo here, so starting off.
I think communities that have never existed in real life,
that would be trippy. Yeah.
Existing on POSH, and really truly speaking to the vision and the mission that we're talking about here, would excite us most, right? When you think about what that is, right? It's like there's all these Discord communities that were born out of the pandemic, and those communities were really, really strong. But now they're all dying, right? And there's inherent issues with Discord retention right now, because people want to go connect in person. But the general ethos of those communities and why those people connected online is still there. They just want to connect in real life. And so if we can get, you know, the incels who connect around Dungeons and Dragons, right? You know, if Dungeons and Dragons communities, or, you know, crypto communities, whatever it might be, right? If there are people that notoriously were only online that are connecting IRL on POSH and getting true, better value out of it, you're talking about who are we competing with? Competing with Discord, competing with Instagram, competing with places where people are congregating online and trying to get those people to meet in person.
Dungeons and Dragons is actually an in-person game.
It has to be in person. There was a movie about it. You know?
We're not as tapped into that culture, but hopefully soon, you know.
No, I mean, like, the concept of like micro cultures, you know, being able to exist in person and like a fun, safe place is just like it's fantastic. Yeah, and you know, you'll see a whole bunch of different types of people on there too. And, you know, we've been talking a lot about Gen Z, but that also applies to, you know, people that are, you know, internet literate, that are on apps, that are, you know, way older than us too. Because there's also, you know, I think an epidemic of loneliness among older people in this country and beyond as well. Yeah. And so thinking about that is totally relevant to you guys. I think another statistic in your favor, back to Gen Z, is that Gen Z favors spending money on experiences rather than items.
Which is correlative to experiential marketing is one of the most effective marketing channels now, if not the most effective marketing channel, probably for the reason that it's getting across to Gen Z so well.
Yeah. So like for brands to be able to be on Posh as well and like creating their own events. Okay. I see that. There's a whole ecosystem here, guys, you know?
Yeah, there's a huge commercial aspect as well. I think Avante and I are just, and our whole team is really passionate about the actual solving the bigger like societal issue and not the commercial side of like, oh, it's a marketing tool.
Yeah, but like even that, right? Like you can have the opportunity for people to connect with the brand in person. Like I'm a brand owner, right? Like I would want to be able to have people connect with the brand in person and see that. And that's going to, you know, make them be more inclined to work with us rather than giving them a great, you know, Facebook ad. Totally. And so, you know, that kind of addresses an issue too. You know, perhaps if brands did not monetize, you know, through social media advertisements as much as they did from, you know, in-person things, you know, maybe they would spend less time on social media and they would look for in-person events to come together, and also opportunities for curation that ensue too, right? Because curated events with like multiple brands and things like that.
People connect around brands. Like,
yeah,
I am a big fat fan of Lululemon, right? As are many tech bros and gals, right? And so I probably would relate to a lot of people at a Lululemon tech mixer, right?
Come on.
Like, fundamentally, and they could monetize that and they get a lot of brand attention. All I'm getting at, right, is that these brands probably have a lot of people that are similar in their customer, you know, databases.
Yep.
And if they were able to bring those people together IRL, that those people would actually get value out of it. And I would just love Lululemon all the more if they connected me with more people that like the brand that also are interested in the same things I'm interested in.
Yeah, and it's like it's not even about like giving away free pants. you know, it's about the concept of bringing people together.
Yeah,
and when you bring
yeah.
like-minded people together, because people are attracted to brands because they feel the same brand ethos. They feel that inside of their bodies and inside of their minds. And so when you bring people together, you have great conversations. It can lead to business opportunities. It can lead to just friendships. That's great too. We love friendship.
As we start to wind down, can you each share of like a moment that stood out or a memorable moment, or did you hit a milestone along your journey of building Posh to now?
I don't remember any light bulb moments, but I will say like just every time we go to an event and there's people in line with the Apple Wallet ticks out or someone scanning or someone scrolling through the feed, like just seeing people use the product in real life is so sick.
I'm definitely the person that's going up to those people in line like, hey, what do you think about this app?
Yeah.
Like, asking them like,
Being
what was
in
your
disguise
They don't know.
is dope.
They don't know
being
who
in
you are.
disguise and seeing people connect, like we just have been saying this whole time, but it really is true. Like seeing people connect in real life and having our app be the epicenter of that connection is truly a recurring light bulb moment that just makes it all the more worthwhile because you don't see a lot of other companies that are able to do that.
So you've had an incredible experience so far, but what's next?
So we just finished up our Series A funding round, which is another $22 million.
$22 million Series A round for Posh. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you. And that is to bring this vision that we've been talking about to market, really go double down on the consumer side of things and empower the freelancers and other people beyond just event organizers and community owners to monetize their contribution to this world of live experiences and really be the ecosystem for every single stakeholder in an event community to not only transact but also communicate and find new people to interact with.
Could you briefly, because we are running out of time, briefly explain the difference perhaps in raising your Series A round versus your seed round? Was it, different metrics, different form of just, speaking to the investors? What were some differences between those two processes?
Yeah, the seed round was a long trudge. It was so the pre-seed of $1.5 million was probably about 2-3 months. The seed round that came after that was about $3.5 million. That took about 6 months. And then we did a seed extension last December of $4 million from the same investors as the seed, just because we were doing pretty well and they wanted to, have more ownership. But that seed round that was 6 months long was a really long trudge, and a lot of it was because we didn't have demand and we didn't know how to build demand in a meaningful way. And I think what Eli was saying, which is a really great comment, is if you're going to market, you have to be very confident in the metrics and how you're doing, and that raising more money will immediately unlock the next step of the business. Because if you're going to market and you're not confident in exactly what to do with that capital and how that capital is going to bring you to the next step, that means that you probably have more learnings to unlock before you should go to market. And investors, VCs, et cetera, can smell that, right? And they're going to want you to go back and learn more. And so this Series A round actually took us 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And it was because we were way beyond the metrics of most companies that raised their Series A.
Yeah.
And these investors understood that if we've already unlocked more than people do with a seed round, right, we're unlocking metrics that some Series B companies haven't even gotten to. So it was very easy because they understood that if we've done so much with so little capital, what would we do with this new $22 million? And so instead of, going to market and asking people for money, it was really about just building and being heads down and understanding that we should still keep making relationships with people and kind of, as we were building, updating people in our network, but never actively fundraising and just saying, like, you can come to us when you think that it, like, makes sense. And that ended up happening.
Hell yeah, that's amazing. So that's obviously everything has gone well and everything's continuing to go well. If you could change, we like to end with this question. If you could change one thing about your journey so far, both of you, Eli, maybe you can start. What would it be?
Well, I would start by just on what you just said. Not everything is going well at all. I think when you have these podcasts, like, people want to hear about the successes of the company and recent accomplishments, but actually, like, in the trenches on a day-to-day basis, we run into massive issues all the time. Avante and I are both just really resilient, and so is our team. So we're always working through those. But I think just wanted to say, like, we do focus on the highlights when you're in a podcast setting, but obviously, like, behind the scenes, we're always working through a ton of stuff.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's so cliche. I definitely would not change anything. The one thing I guess I wish is, like, this podcast, we talked a lot about the big problem that we're solving. And I think it took us a while to see that, which I like because it feels better now. But it's just interesting thinking back because when we started, it was more like, we're making a white label ticketing solution for your nightlife parties. And now it's like, we want to solve loneliness and human connection and these massive ideas. And I think it took us a bit to, like, understand that the true essence of a venture is solving a massive problem like that. You do need to start with something niche, but it even, like, me working on it now on a day-to-day basis feels that much more empowering that's the impact that we could have.
I mean, it's about the journey, not the destination. I mean, that's an obvious part of startups, and the concept of developing your mission through nuance, I think is so well important.
Said. Yeah.
And you all are trying to solve an incredibly nuanced problem, and you're taking it on in a way that has not been done before. And I wish the best for you all, because I think that if you all are successful, it will have better societal outcomes. And seeking to start a business on a societal outcome, I think, is really important. I think the definition of a social entrepreneur is someone that seeks to benefit society. And people would not see your business on the surface and think that it's a social entrepreneurship company. But I would think that you are
You're giving
trying
us
to
great
solve.
marketing material. Right?
No, listen. I mean, I consider myself a social entrepreneur. I ran a sustainability business, like all this stuff, right? And I've tried to build a career around that. But something that I've realized is, from what you've been saying today, right, and from what others say that are in these tech-focused businesses, is that tech can be good. Tech can be a force for good. I believe that sincerely. And you guys are a great example of that. Avante, though, if there's one thing you could change, what would it be?
The biggest realization that we've more recently had that I wish we had earlier is that people are everything, and raising the talent bar earlier would definitely have brought us 10 or 100 or 1 million steps ahead of where we are today. Like Eli said, right? You're always doing well, but you could always be doing better. And so just from the early onset, we were very lucky to find each other. A lot of people settle down with a co-founder that just solves a specific need. You're non-technical and you need someone to write code. And you find someone that, you don't bond with on a personal level, or that's not really that talented of an engineer. Then you end up with a garbage MVP that can't scale, and that person can't manage engineers, et cetera, right? That would suck. And et cetera. So just really holding that talent bar as high as possible from as early as possible will bring you infinitely farther.
All right. Thank you, Eli. Thank you, Avante, for joining us. Everyone check out Avante and Eli at POSH.VIP. Thank you for coming out. Do you have anybody to shout out before you guys leave?
Anything to plug? Where can people find you? Where can people find Posh?
On socials, Posh VIP, our website. I just dropped a mixtape. Go get my mixtape.
What's your hat?
We're both on social media, just as our full names. It's easy to find us. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I just want to shout out our entire team, obviously.
Yeah.
Do you have a name for the team, like the Posh team, Posh Squad?
Poshers.
No?
Posh family. We're the only companies I feel like that we have an entire iMessage group chat of every single person in our team. Obviously, we use Slack for most important communication, but we also have monthly team dinners, etc. And so
That's awesome.
the culture and just the Posh family that we can really call family really means a lot to us. And so people that drop what they're doing and move to New York and change their lives towards this mission is we wouldn't be here without them.
All right. Avante and Eli, shout out Posh. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.